Welcome to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of Friday, the 7th of November, 2014. The post-election show, the pre-Veterans Day show, the Guy Fawkes +2 show, and much to report on. Let me say, first of all, the most important news of all is the tremendous advance made by the Tax Wall Street Party, the Tax Wall Street movement. And that comes in these elections. And let me go, first of all, to Nebraska. We're going to be talking to Dan Burdorf in Nebraska later on. But let me just point out, this was a masterful campaign, one worthy of study in the near future, starting from virtually no resources and a small group of volunteers. This got into the official cattleman's debate, along with the Republican candidate Sass, who is now the winner on his way to the Senate, and we'll get him later. Domina, the Democrat, two other candidates, and Dan Burdorf. The 2 points, of course, tax Wall Street, the 1% Wall Street sales tax, and the question of nationalizing the Federal Reserve, the $5 trillion credit, and the 30 million new jobs. So all of that came out, and that got into an AP wire that went around the world, and indeed the apparently the Omaha World Herald even had it. Now, this was not possible to get sufficient signatures because of the archaic technicalities to be on the ballot, but there was also a registered write-in campaign, which unfortunately fell short of the threshold of reporting the number of votes. But in this case, most emphatically, the number of votes is largely irrelevant. This is a statewide campaign against a very well-funded Ben Sass, reactionary Republican, with Freemasonic and religious extremist networks that we'll be talking about here over the coming weeks. Take a look at, for example, the recent article here by Wayne Madsen about the GOP, where he has a new reading of the P. We'll talk about that too later. So that is the Dan Burdorf campaign, and again, we'll be drawing the results of this during the hot stove season, right? Well, what does this show about how do you organize insurgent political campaigns here as time goes on? And secondly, James Hinton in California 5, the 5th Congressional District of California. James Hinton is coming in with about 25% of the votes so far. There may be some pockets of uncollected votes. Hard to say about that. But look at this. James Hinton spent about $500, is my best estimate, and he got 30,000 votes. This means, of course, that he got about 60 votes per dollar, 60 votes per dollar. In the case of other candidates, I'm thinking of Bloomberg, and I should have the statistic in my head, but I don't. When Bloomberg ran for re-election as mayor of New York, he was spending upwards of $100 per vote. So in the case of Bloomberg, it's dollars per vote. In the case of Hinton, it's votes per dollar, 30, compared to something like $100 or $150 per vote for Bloomberg. And the other interesting comparison here is the Cindy Sheehan for Congress campaign of 2008. And there we see that Cindy Sheehan, with all that publicity from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream Foundation, all that television exposure, she was the anti-Bush pasionaria of 2004 and related times, with all the anti-war and anti-Republican ferment. She got 16% in 2008. That's 46,000 votes. I don't know how much money she had. Sure as hell more than the $500 that James Hinton had. So those two benchmarks, right? The programmatic and the authority of the candidacy of Dan Bergdorf, and this tremendous achievement of Hinton of matching an entrenched, well-funded henchman of the Pelosi machine. This shows that something can be done. Many people now after this election would say, well, I'm in the slough of despond. Far too many were in the slough of despond already before the election, as Charlie Cook of the Cook Political Report has gloated. Yeah, and well, he might. CBS News, The Washington Post, the Cook Political Report, Jon Stewart, all of them spreading what Cook calls despondency, despair. It's a sophisticated kind of legal voter suppression. You make the the target group, believe that voting is futile. There is no point. There is no point. So you might as well stay home. And that is what many Democratic voters did. As Obama reminded these Republicans, right? Last time the turnout was closer to 2/3, but this time it's close to 1/3 because the key group stayed home. The black vote was 30%. It could have been 5 or 7 points more, and maybe we would have had some different results. So thanks to Jon Stewart and Russell Brand and the rest of these clowns, they said, no, don't worry, don't vote. It's not worth it. Well, now you're going to feel, unfortunately, through the pain in your own flesh, what it's going to be. And again, we'll hear from Dan Bergdorf and James Hinton later on in the program. But now let's look at the unfortunate panorama of the of who did win. You remember all of our points of analysis. Remember, our perspective here is the Republican Party should be destroyed. After that, the Democratic Party should be split between a Wall Street branch, the majority, at least of elected officials, and then the minority, the New Deal populist pro-labor group. We know that the oligarchy controls the president during the first term by the need for money to run for a second term. But in the second term, the president is controlled by scandals and negative publicity. So we know all that. And we know that there's been a huge media narrative that Obama's unpopular, therefore the Democrats are going to lose, and therefore you should stay home and not waste your time on this, right? And that is, of course, absolutely crazy. So the result of all this now is obviously a bad result. Now, Obama has himself to blame. Obama did not have a job program. You don't have a job creation program. That, of course, means that you're in a depression. You've got economic stagnation. You have nothing to say about it. Official position of the Obama White House was the recession is over. We don't need to do anything more about it. Let's get on with the war on women. Let's get on with other issues. And these, although some of these issues have merit, this was not enough. So that kind of complacency was fatal. Obama, I must say, Obama shows a little bit more fight after the election than at the outset of the election. But, of course, remember, there was no Democratic war room. There was no Democratic attack. There was nothing about McCain meeting with the cannibal, the caliph, and the kidnapper, consorting with ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists. There was nothing about McCain's promise that he would press as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, that he would press to start two wars, a ground war with Iraq and a ground war in Syria. None of that was picked up. There was the Mitch McConnell tape. That was picked up by Grimes. And we'll say a nice thing about Grimes in a minute on World Crisis Radio. World Crisis Radio in our post-election show. I would like to just remind the control room, we do have that recording number. If the control room could be so kind as to connect us to the recording number, we then have that backup, if that's okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So now let's continue. There was then, of course, the infamous Mitch McConnell tape promising David Koch that if the Republicans took power, there would be no increase in the minimum wage, no extension of unemployment benefits, and no relief for students who were crushed by $1.3 trillion of high-interest student debt. The only person who used that I could see was Grimes. Allison Grimes, much maligned, seemed to me a certain amount of fight, and certainly a campaign that was more radical than most Democratic campaigns because it had to be. She had to attack McConnell, therefore she had to attack Koch, she had to attack something substantive. The Democrats had no job program, they had a few floating things, but at the same time, remember that Obama backed off on the minimum wage campaign. In midsummer or early summer, Obama backed off on the minimum wage campaign saying it's too divisive. Why don't you people go forward in the various states and do that, which then, of course, did happen. At the same time, the Republicans ran on nothing. They had pure demagogy, no program. What are your intentions? We won't tell you. We hate Obama. We're not Obama. That's the Republican campaign. And that, of course, is a piece of pernicious nonsense. The media, in a sweetheart symbiosis with those Republicans, essentially said, we'll let you off. We won't ask you what you're going to do. And now they pull it up out of their nose. So we have all of this having happened. Now, the situation, of course, is quite grim. However, we look at Obama in his post-election speech and then today, the lunchtime meeting with the various congressional leaders. His line is, I think accurately, you guys ran on nothing. Now tell me what you want. We'll let the pundits figure this out. I heard the 1/3 who voted. I also heard the 2/3 who didn't vote. So Dana Milbank of Skull and Bones says essentially that he's not suitably contrite. The others, Krauthammer says it's a policy of petulance and denial. I urge Obama to hang tough. I would say to Obama, go big, go long, do something for those Hispanics, right? You can't expect to get Hispanic votes if you don't do something for them. How about those students? You didn't do a damn thing for the students. Obama, you could have said, I think Elizabeth Warren was right, not this year, but last year. The old Elizabeth Warren is interesting right now from last year. The 0.75% paid for by the Federal Reserve. Now you're talking something halfway serious. 3.5% paid through the Treasury. A bad joke. So I would say to Obama, I would urge you, hang tough. Do something big and spectacular for the Hispanics. And then, as Mitch McConnell said, you're going to have a red flag. You're showing a red flag to the Republican bull. Yes. Or, as Boehner says, if you play with matches, you will burn your fingers. Take that threat and put it you know where. And, of course, poisoning the well. That's the other one. Look, the hypocrisy of the Republicans and indeed of many voters is amazing. They say, we don't like acrimony, we don't like gridlock, we don't like attack ads, and then they reward the party of national sabotage, gridlock, and attack ads. Now, we're told that the Republican leaders were so careful, they didn't let any wackos come through. You remember the chuckleheads, the wacko birds, the fanatics, the sociopaths, the obsessed individuals. Well, let's see, who do we have? Cory Gardner in Colorado. This is a personhood freak, carefully chosen. The difference between the chuckleheads, the wacko birds on the one hand, and the mainstream Republicans, purely cosmetic, purely a matter of self-marketing, right? Hide your lunatic opinions. Don't get too far out in front. Be a sort of a controlled reactionary, right? Don't let it all hang out. So Cory Gardner, this was a place where the Tea Party failed veteran Buck was going to take over that Senate race. The Republicans got him out. They gave him a seat in the Congress. And now Cory Gardner, a Tea Party personhood freak extremist, gets the seat. In North Carolina, Tom Tillis, part of the hated local government machine, right, in the South Carolina legislature. This guy is a party to savage cuts of education, which, given the North Carolina future built on Research Triangle and related things, that's a death sentence for the future of the state. He gets the seat. James Lankford, another specimen. This guy looks like death warmed over. From Oklahoma, he takes the seat vacated by the Corbett or whatever his name was, retiring. He's already forgotten. Shelley Moore Capito. Shelley Moore Capito, as the Moore suggests, she's a legacy. She's a silver spoon oligarch. She's there because her father was the governor of the state. Steve Daines in Montana, another extremist, I believe. He's on the personhood agenda. David Perdue in Georgia, the voice of the raging petty bourgeois id. Mark Levin says David Perdue is a true conservative. Mike Rounds in South Dakota. My God, where do they get these people? And then we have the top three, actually, on this rogues gallery of new Republican senators. Joni Ernst. Now here, the question for the United States, for these Republicans, where is the boundary between being a reactionary and being a fascist? And I would say you become a fascist when you advocate the use of armed force, illegal armed force, to get to your goals, right? In other words, the squadrace of Mussolini and the Sturmabteilung of Hitler. These are people who go into violent terroristic actions outside of the law to smash their opponents and get through. Now, with Joni Ernst, we have, of course, the hog castrator, the cultural populist. We've been through this, right? The cultural populism has been done to death. So she was for impeachment already back in the middle of the summer. She is somebody who says that she's got a 9mm pistol and that she's going to use that pistol on government officials who come by and who don't respect her rights. So with that, I'm afraid, as soon as you bring out the 9mm pistol, you've crossed the line from being a reactionary to being a fascist. Back in a minute. I now have the statistic. Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg of New York, competing for a third term in November 2009, spent $102 million of his own money, $183 per vote, $183 per vote. James Hinton is approximately 60 votes per dollar. So if you're looking where to invest your money, and I'll wrap this up in just a second on these candidates. So Joni Ernst, I think we've agreed, has, according to at least one powerful argument, crossed the line from being a reactionary to being a fascist with her 9mm pistol. That applies to, you can apply that retroactively. And then we have the dynamic duo, Ben Sasse and Tom Cotton. Ben Sasse in Nebraska, Tom Cotton in Arkansas. And what do we have here? These are two of a kind. You'll remember that we had in previous years Barack Obama and Deval Patrick, one the principal candidate, one the spare. And I think this example has attracted enough attention so that a certain Freemasonic reactionary network has decided to field these two. They were featured in a New York Times article a while ago. Similar profiles, elite education, Ivy League, international credentials, but at the same time, good old boys. Now, with Ben Sasse, he, of course, a reactionary, thinks the Pope is the Antichrist. The principal thing with him, though, is the slogan, 93, 93, 93. That was his 93 days, 93 counties, 93 new ideas. However, unfortunately, this is the signature of Aleister Crowley of the Order of the Golden Dawn and British intelligence and the British Occult Bureau, a British spook. However, Ben Sass represents a very, very, very dubious network. And remember, the problem with Ben Sass is when Pagegate was going on, when Congressman Foley and Congressman Kolba were molesting the Pages, who were minors, there was a proctor there, a tutor and supervisor of these Pages, and that was Ben Sass. And later on, when he went to take over a small university there in Nebraska, there was a huge scandal in the athletic department about prostitution and sexual exploitation. So that's Ben Sass. Tom Cotton, of course, another reactionary. I guess the thing with him is that he voted against the Pandemic Preparedness Act. We'll be fleshing out these portraits as time goes on. But Ben Sass, quite possibly, as he's been telling people for years, a candidate for the presidency, 45th president. That doesn't give him much time. Tom Cotton, the spare, I think, although maybe it's the other way around, from Arkansas. Now, you look at these people. Here's where we get down to the nitty-gritty. Look at this collection of imbeciles, right? Look at a bunch of cretins. Look at a bunch of scoundrels. Look at one is dumb and corrupt. The other one is cruel and stupid. You can do better. You, I mean you, listening to this. You can do better. You are a moral and intellectual giant, and even a political giant when it comes to campaigning skills, compared to this collection of jackasses. It is unbelievable. This is what and these people, I can imagine a news broadcast in Weimar, Germany, in like 1932, and you'd hear the commentators say, well, there are some people who think that Hitler is actually the most moderate solution. Such commentators might say, why, when you compare him to Röhm and the Strasser brothers, he seems to be much more moderate, these commentators may say, right? So you get the idea. The news media are covering up the fact, they even say, oh, those really crazy ones, the Sharon Angles, the witch, the Todd Aiken and Murdoch the Morlock in Indiana. Oh, those were crazy people. But now we've got, much more solid candidates. These are chuckleheads and much, much worse. So the only thing I can say to people is run for office. That means you. And if you can't do it yourself, support the movement that we have, the Tax Wall Street Party, the United Front Against Austerity. Our program works. Our program gets mass traction. You can go farther with that program than any other program. And it has the wonderful benefit of allowing the survival of civilization as compared to the other ones. Now, what's going to happen? Well, the Democrats are shifting left. The blue dogs are extinct. Within a couple of weeks, we're going to have a budget by December 11th. Will that include the Export-Import Bank? There are all kinds of other things that are on the chopping block. Will Obama go big for the Hispanics? I urge him to go very, very big. Get that group on your side. Bind them to your soul with hoops of steel. Do them a historic service and a service to the United States, because we need to have a labor force. They are an indispensable ingredient in the United States' ability to compete with powerful rivals like China, like the European Union, Japan, and all the rest, right? We need them. This is just a matter of overweening national interest. And if the Republicans go for impeachment, then bring it on. Bring it on. That would even get the Hispanics more mobilized. Now, the Republican ideas, as Obama said, you ran on nothing, so now tell us what you think you want. And they say, well, the lesson of this election is there are $2 trillion of cash overseas, and we could bring it home if we give them a cash holiday. I'd say pass something that starts a 20 or 30% tax on the corporations that have that overseas if they don't bring it home. In other words, something punitive, something aversive. Don't reward them. By the way, little Rand Paul is big on bringing home the $2 trillion. And then they want more free trade, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. No way. The giant sucking sound, we've had it. Union busting. Oh, my God. The Time magazine cover story, you'll remember, is whether a group of millionaires from Silicon Valley can bust the teachers' union and throw out the rotten apples. And this is, of course, Michelle Rhee, but there's a character here called David Welsh, and he wants to bust the teachers' union. The Wall Street Journal today has an article where they're hoping that the results of this election mark the political collapse of the teachers' unions, and they want to play up the fact that Marshall Tuck, some kind of a Democratic sub, was defeated. Good. He deserved to be defeated. Down with Tuck. And this woman in Rhode Island, right, the new Democratic governor who got there by cutting the pension funds, this is a dangerous tendency. Don't get sucked into a Democratic Party with a strong anti-union, union-busting, hostile to labor. That is suicide, you Democrats. This is a new dimension for the degradation of the Democratic Party. Nominations. Hey, might be good to have a Surgeon General, huh? How about getting that through? Concerning war and peace, we mentioned McCain. Notice also the leprechaun, little Ron Paul, coming out of the cerements of his forgotten existence and saying, after the polls had closed, little Ron, the leprechaun, said, by the way, if the Republicans take the Senate, that increases the possibility for war. Thank you, Ron, after the polls had closed. That's just what we needed. Couldn't you have said that a little bit earlier? This guy's acting in bad faith. He's covering his derriere. There are also, however, fortunately, bad omens for Hillary. Bad omens for Elizabeth Warren, too. This was not the year of the woman. This was the year of the unwoman. And look at them all that went down, right? Michelle Nunn, Grimes, unfortunately, the woman running against Scott Walker, the right-wing female Wall Street Democrat. Hillary. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, keep up with everything at tarpley.net, tarpley.net. If you haven't looked lately, there's a massive material on the elections. And I'm afraid for the control room that the echo is back. So, yes, a lot of right-wing Wall Street Democratic women went down to defeat. It's not a good brand, so maybe that will play some role in the selection process. Now, remember the good things. The minimum wage. This is New Deal America. The minimum wage passed in Alaska, in Arkansas, in South Dakota, in Nevada. It passed in San Francisco by 30, I think it's even 40, 50 points. It was an immense victory. This is New Deal America, people. Make no mistake. The most odious of all governors, with lacking the political skills and the national support. Corbett in Pennsylvania went down to defeat. And then Scott Brown, right, the candidate in New Hampshire, his campaign song, Just a Gigolo by Louis Armstrong, or his campaign manual, The Carpetbaggers by Harold Robbins, but defeated. And this is important because he ran as a populist, but after all, he worked for the State Street Bank. He wrecked any attempt to try to regulate Wall Street in any sense at all. Down he goes. And then we've got that guy, Southland, or whatever his name is, that is actually a Florida congressman, the biggest enemy of food stamps, the guy who wanted to make food stamps contingent on a job, when the whole point is you get food stamps when you can't find a job. He also went down to defeat. Lee Terry, the racist Republican in Nebraska, also defeated. So remember that the minimum wage is important because it lifts the entire wage structure. It is not accurate to say that if you're making 20 or 25 an hour, the minimum wage does not interest you. It does. It's going to lift, is going to be an updraft for all wage categories. That is how this happened. And of course, the minimum wage, essential piece of the New Deal, Social Security Act of 1935, unemployment insurance run by the states. So there we go. It is New Deal America. And the program adequate to reflect that is the Tax Wall Street Party. Seize the Fed, $5 trillion for infrastructure, 30 million new productive jobs, 5 million summer jobs for disadvantaged youth, and the Wall Street sales tax, 1%. With that, we can refinance your student loans to zero. We can stop foreclosures on your house, and we can provide free college education through community college and state institutions. And we should. And again, Democrats, don't be surprised if the students are not enthusiastic. You didn't do a damn thing for them. So, the warning to Obama, no free trade, no tax bonanza for the $2 trillion hoarded abroad. And it is interesting now to see the response of Obama. The post-election press conference, once again, more fight from Obama, although in an understated way, than we've seen perhaps in a long time. Now, you normally calculate Obama will cave in. Remember what the threat is. Bill Clinton in 1999 and 00, those were the worst crimes. In 1999, it was the abolition of Glass-Steagall, the permission for interstate banking, monstrous increase in speculation, and in 00, it was even worse. It was the legalization and deregulation of all derivatives. Those were the worst things. And from 00 to 08 is a direct straight line to the crash into the abyss. So those interesting points. Little note on the role of Rand Paul. If you remember the old Miss America ceremony from Atlantic City, and you'd have Bert Parks come out there and you'd start singing, "Here she is, Miss America," and then Miss America would come out. Rand Paul was playing Bert Parks for Mitch McConnell of the Mitch and Koch show. There he was singing for him. And remember, Little Rand says the Republican brand sucks. Yeah, Little Rand, but you were out there campaigning for every one of those suckers. There was nobody so degraded, so reactionary, so sociopathic, so crazy that you wouldn't go out there and give a speech for them, Rand. So we observed all of that. Forget the common ground, if anything. Stop prating about cooperation. This is not going to happen. If it does, it's going to be bad. We want confrontation. We want gridlock. Gridlock is our only hope. Things are quite grim in many ways. But again, we may have the pessimism of the intelligence, but we have the optimism of the will. And as McCain reminds us, two choices: get active or get radioactive. Now, there are some interesting things going on. Obama writes a letter to the Ayatollah, right? Not even to Rouhani, not to the reformist president, but to Ayatollah Khamenei. So there we go. And it's, let's work together against ISIS and let's solve our nuclear problem along the way. A lot of people in Saudi are freaking. A lot of people around Netanyahu are freaking. But I think this is a little bit promising for the United States. Now, the other thing is Syria. Something has happened in Syria. The headline of one of the headlines of the Washington Post today, Friday, November 7th, Syrian rebels reject report on airstrikes. And here it is. There's an area of northwest Syria which is extremely sensitive because it is a border crossing. It's one of the border crossings from Turkey that's closest to Aleppo. It's a strategic point on the map. And we're talking about Bab el Hawa. Bab meaning gate, as I learned. Hawa, H-A-W-A, that's the crossing. The town is called Sarmada, the road to Aleppo. There's another one called the Bab Salamen crossing. Read all this in the Washington Post. article by Karen DeYoung, Liz Sly, try that, Liz S-L-Y, and Missy Ryan. So the idea is the U.S. has bombed the allies of the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, and that is to say parts of Nusra. The U.S. has bombed the Khorasan group and parts of Jabhat al-Nusra. And not only that, they have bombed the Arar al-Sham, A-H-R-A-R, Sham, of course, Syria. This has caused a furor. So the U.S. is bombing people that are al-Qaeda, but allied with the FSA, and we're supposed to respect those alliances? I'm so sorry. And here we have a think tanker, Charles Lister, who monitors Syria for the Brookings Doha Center in Qatar, indicated that the Thursday strikes may have far-reaching effects for the long-term U.S. strategy of strengthening the moderate fighters. The U.S. may now have lost Syria, said Lister on Twitter. The U.S. may have lost Syria. Why? Because the FSA insists on allying with al-Qaeda against ISIS? Well, good riddance to that Syria, right? The real Syria, the real moderates are all in the parliament there, right? The moderate opposition is sitting in the parliament in Damascus, where they exercise the role of a parliamentary opposition, and their rights are thoroughly guaranteed. Therefore, we have to look at increasing acrimony with the Saudi Arabian royal family, and somehow the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Harem al-Sharif, the question of the rebuilding of the temple, the tremendous tensions with Netanyahu somehow fit into this. Is Obama attempting a rapprochement with Iran? Now, that would be a legacy. You want to go for your legacy, do something like Nixon and China, Obama and Iran. Back in a minute.